We don't need congressional action for this move, however.
Well, I thought I just got clarification. Well, it's going to be important to both the chairman and myself to understand your position as Attorney General on whether or not you can proceed with this merger without congressional action.
We are keeping ATF, we are keeping DEA. We are putting them under the same umbrella within the Department of Justice.
So, I'm not arguing with you here. I want to understand your position. I think it will be important to members on both sides of the committee. The appropriations law currently would require that Congress approve of this merger. And so my question to you as Attorney General is, do you agree with that or disagree with that?
We will complete this reorganization, and I'm committed. I will look at that under the law. We will not violate.
This may look like a routine budget clarification, but it's actually a stress test of how far executive authority can stretch before colliding with Congress. What's really being tested here is whether statutory limits still restrain agency power when efficiency is used as justification. This raises broader questions about separation of powers, fiscal oversight, and whether authorization laws are binding rules or flexible obstacles. In this video, we'll break down how a single exchange reveals a deeper conflict between democratic accountability and administrative momentum.
Senator Capito, thank you. We do not intend to have a second round of questions, but in our usual fashion, I'm going to call on Senator Van Hollen for his concluding questions and wrap up, and then I'll do the same.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Attorney General Bondi, I have some budget-related questions to follow up on here. First, with respect to the proposal with the ATF. I've heard your testimony here. I heard it in the House, so I really don't want to get into a I'm not questioning you about the policy at this point in time. I think you hear there's bipartisan disagreement here. But I do want to understand your view with respect to the appropriations law, because current appropriations law does require congressional authorization to make this change, to make this merger. And so my question to you, as the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of the United States, is will you comply with the budget authorization law?
We will comply with the budget law. And you know, Senator, I'm glad you brought this merger up, because if I was still a state prosecutor and hearing this, I would be concerned too about what's happening to ATF. ATF will keep its brand. DEA will keep its brand. But what they're doing, they're going under one umbrella, doing away with the bureaucracy at the top. These agents are going, they want to be out hunting down criminals. That's what they want to do. They work, so much of this work is the same work, going back and forth, and now they will be working collaboratively together to keep America safe. And we're going to put hundreds of agents back, thousands, back on the streets, and that's where they want to be. And I would have had the initial concerns that you have about that. But give us a chance, let it work, let the DEA and ATF work together, get those agents out there, do away with the bureaucracy, and hopefully we will make America safer as a result of it.
Well, I will say that wasn't just my reaction to the proposal. I was actually hearing from ATF agents as well. So again, we will obviously review that question in a bipartisan way on the committee. But I just wanted your assurance, and I appreciate it, that you'll comply with the appropriations law, which would require congressional action in order to go forward with
we don't need congressional action for this move, however.
Well, I thought I just got clarification. Well, it's going to be important to both the chairman and myself to understand your position as Attorney General on whether or not you can proceed with this merger without congressional action.
We are keeping ATF, we are keeping DEA. We are putting them under the same umbrella within the Department of Justice.
So I'm not arguing with you here. I want to understand your position. I think it will be important to members on both sides of the committee. The appropriations law currently would require that Congress approve of this merger. And so my question to you as Attorney General is, do you agree with that or disagree with that?
We will complete this reorganization, and I'm committed. I will look at that under the law. We will not violate the law, Senator, and we will work with Congress regarding that.
No, I appreciate that. So the second point I wanted to raise had to do with the prosecution of hate crimes, and I share your vigor in wanting to go after and prosecute hate crimes. I would just point out that the budget that you submitted zeroes out funding for 3 of the DOJ hate crimes programs, the hate crimes training program, Shepherd Bird Hate Crimes, the Jabara Hire No Hate Act, and the community approaches to advancing justice. So I hope you'll work with the committee if we seek to restore funding for those programs.
Yes, Senator, I just pulled up the details of those three. Let me see. I'd be happy to discuss those with you further.
Good. And finally, I want to go back.
All three of those.
Thank you. I want to go back to the issues of grant determinations, because I think there continues to be some confusion between grants that had already been obligated that were withheld. And to my knowledge, there are about 400 of those still pending. It'd be helpful to get from your team if you have a different number. And then there's what we call notices for information, which relates to notices for future grant awards in this current fiscal year.
Yes, there is a difference.
And so I understood your earlier testimony to say, with respect to the notices, the department plan to issue those very shortly. Is that right?
Yeah, and Senator, yes, you are correct on that. We notified the affected grantees and members of Congress regarding the terminations and how to appeal. That was the $811 million of grants that were initially terminated in 2025. We're also talking about upcoming ones as well.
Right. So I want to leave this hearing with some clarity on this issue. So when it comes to the notices of funding opportunities, because the clock is ticking on this fiscal year, do you and the Department of Justice intend to quickly notify people of those opportunities going forward?
Yes, Senator Van Hollen, as I said earlier, and it will be done on a rolling basis, but yes, within the coming weeks, we are absolutely doing that, yes.
And so finally, on
a rolling basis.
On the other category, which are the grants that had been previously obligated, I do have concerns, Madam Attorney General, with the idea that the way we're going to get them to stop being withheld is members of Congress calling. I appreciate the invitation, and I will look to see if we've been hearing from people. But this category of grants relates to people who already went through the process and already had those grants obligated, and they're currently being held. So my question to you is, can you tell us how many are still being held today? And I don't like the idea that in order for somebody to get their withheld grant unheld, that they have to call a member of Congress. That should be, so how many are left? Do you know how many of these grants are?
I don't know exactly, Senator, but I know many of them are the subject of ongoing litigation, so I wouldn't be able to speak of that in detail in this forum anyway.
Well, maybe just a follow-up, because it would be helpful to try to narrow the scope of this. Again, my understanding, and this was the subject of the letter I referenced earlier from a number of senators.
And I have not read that letter, but I will be happy to read that letter.
If you and your team could get back to us right away on that, because these are grants that, as the chairman knows, have been previously obligated, some many years ago, but frozen. And so the question is, how can we get them unfrozen? And members of Congress will call, but not everybody, can just call up their member of Congress or thinks of calling their member of Congress. We need a process that's fair to everybody. I hope you'd agree.
And actually, citizens have called as well.
Well, exactly. And so, exactly. So, but again, this is an ongoing issue. And I know colleagues on both sides of the aisle are hearing from it, folks. So, Mr. Chairman, unless something else comes up, that's it. And look forward to continuing the conversation.
It's not my intention to ask any topics or questions that cause you to come back again, but if I do.
Thank you, Senator Moran.
You're welcome, General.
The moment that just unfolded in this hearing was not loud, not explosive, and not theatrical. It was quieter than that, more unsettling. Senator Chris Van Hollen asked a simple question, one that should have had a simple answer. Will you comply with the budget authorization law? And for several minutes, the room hovered in that space between clarity and ambiguity, between promise and power, between what the law requires and what authority believes it can reinterpret. Attorney General Pam Bondi said the words, "Lawmakers always want to hear. We will not violate the law." She spoke of cooperation, of compliance, of working with Congress. But as the exchange continued, the meaning began to blur. What started as an assurance slowly shifted into something else. A reorganization that, in her view, could proceed without congressional approval, even while acknowledging that appropriations law appears to require it. Same agencies, same names, one umbrella, less bureaucracy, more efficiency. And suddenly the question was no longer just about budgets or mergers. It was about who decides. This moment reveals something fundamental about modern governance. Not a scandal, but a pattern. Power today rarely announces itself as defiance. It presents itself as practicality, as streamlining, as good intentions wrapped in administrative language. But the Constitution was not designed for convenience. It was designed for friction, for process, for limits. Especially when power feels justified in moving faster than oversight can follow. Van Hollen pressed not because he opposed the policy outright, but because he understood the precedent. When the chief law enforcement officer of the United States believes an action can move forward first and be reviewed later, the balance begins to tilt. Congress does not exist to be informed after the fact. It exists to authorize, to restrain, to represent the public interest before irreversible decisions are made. The hearing exposed how easily lines can blur when authority and urgency collide. Bondi spoke passionately about agents wanting to be in the field, about reducing top-heavy administration, about efficiency serving public safety. These arguments resonate. They always do. Efficiency is persuasive, but efficiency without authorization is not reform. It is reinterpretation of power. This exchange also revealed a deeper tension inside the American system. One branch asserting flexibility, another insisting on clarity, both claiming to act in the public interest. And caught in between are the mechanisms that hold government accountable: budgets, grants, statutory limits, often invisible to the public, yet essential to democratic control. The discussion widened beyond reorganization. Funding for programs designed to address serious societal harm was zeroed out in the proposed budget, even as commitments to enforcement were emphasized. Grants already approved were frozen. Others delayed. And when asked how affected recipients could seek resolution, the answer drifted toward an uncomfortable truth: that access might depend on who knows whom, or who has the ability to call a member of Congress. That is not how a fair system is meant to function. Van Hollen's concern was not abstract. It was moral. When funds legally obligated are withheld without a clear, transparent process, trust erodes. When relief depends on personal intervention rather than standardized procedure, equality under the law weakens. A government that prides itself on justice cannot allow its processes to become opaque, discretionary, or selectively navigable. Bondi acknowledged uncertainty. Ongoing litigation, complex reviews, rolling timelines, all reasonable explanations. But taken together, they painted a picture of a system struggling to reconcile authority with accountability. A Department of Justice promising compliance while redefining its own boundaries in real time. This is how power shifts in a democracy, not through declarations, but through administrative momentum, through decisions framed as temporary, technical, or necessary, through assurances that everything will be reviewed later, even as actions move forward now. And that is why moments like this matter. Because the health of the American system is not measured only by outcomes, but by process. By whether laws passed by elected representatives still bind those entrusted to enforce them. By whether efficiency is allowed to override consent. By whether the public can still see where decisions are made and who is accountable for them. This hearing did not end with resolution. It ended with promises to follow up, to review, to continue conversations. That in itself is telling. Oversight today is not a single moment. It is a sustained effort, one that requires persistence from lawmakers, transparency from institutions, and attention from the public. Democracy does not collapse in one dramatic act. It erodes quietly when questions go unanswered, when authority moves faster than authorization, when power reassures rather than explains. What we witnessed here was not just a budget debate, it was a test of whether law still stands above convenience, whether process still matters when urgency is invoked, whether assurances are enough, or whether accountability must be proven. The American system depends on more than trust. It depends on verification, on limits, on the courage to ask uncomfortable questions, and the resolve to demand clear answers. And that responsibility does not belong only to those seated at the dais. It belongs to every citizen paying attention. If you believe transparency matters, if you believe law should restrain power, not trail behind it, if you believe oversight is not obstruction but protection, then stay engaged. Support independent reporting. Share these moments, demand clarity, and subscribe to Liberty Report USA.